Blake Lively breaks down screaming as shocking details are leaked in court, and honestly, it was the most dramatic thing since her last perfume ad. The courtroom went from legal proceedings to full-on daytime soap realness in under 60 seconds. And trust me, no PR team on earth could have saved her from what came out next. On the morning of Wednesday, May 28th, what was scheduled as a quiet procedural hearing in Los Angeles Superior Court turned into an absolute courtroom disaster for Blake Lively. This was not the official start of her trial. It was a pre-trial evidentiary session meant to finalize which materials would be admissible when the real fireworks began later this summer. What triggered it was only one image, a blown-up photo of a former employee's bloodied shoulder, held together with 9 medical sutures, suddenly displayed on a courtroom screen. Blake looked at the image for 2 seconds, stood up, pointed at it, and shouted, "This is a lie!" The gallery froze. This wasn't just a celebrity losing her temper. It was the face of a billion-dollar brand cracking on record. And just like that, the narrative wasn't about legal strategy anymore. It was about whether Blake Lively just publicly destroyed her own defense. The judge, clearly not impressed by theatrics, warned her to sit down and stay silent. She didn't. Witnesses in the room said she was visibly shaking, mumbling over her lawyer's objections, insisting everything being shown was doctored and taken out of context. The judge finally called for a 10-minute recess, not to protect Blake's mental health, but to restore basic order to a proceeding that was quickly unraveling. And outside the courtroom, the press was already running with it. Blake Lively screams in court after shocking injury photos released. So, what exactly was in those photos that set her off? That brings us to Carly Hughes, the real center of this unfolding legal nightmare. Carly Hughes was once the rising star inside Preserve, Blake's ill-fated lifestyle brand that folded in silence years ago. On the stand that morning, Carly told the court what insiders have whispered for years, that behind the pastel filters and wellness quotes was a work environment that was, in her words, hostile, punishing, and emotionally dangerous. She described a branding meeting in 2019, not an argument, not a disagreement, but a violent outburst. Blake, infuriated over a rejected campaign idea, allegedly hurled a wine glass across the room. It struck Carly's shoulder. The wound was deep enough to require 9 stitches. But here's the part that made the courtroom shift uncomfortably. Carly wasn't taken to the hospital immediately. She was allegedly told to stay until the draft emails were finalized. And when your marketing job ends with blood loss and medical neglect, it stops being corporate. It becomes criminal. The ER report introduced into evidence was brutal. Blood loss, mild concussion, delayed treatment. The physician's notes even included a chilling line. Laceration would have been potentially fatal if positioned 2 to 3 inches higher. The courtroom heard that. Blake heard that. And yet she showed no visible remorse. Carly, by contrast, closed her testimony with a simple sentence that hung in the air like a death bell. "If that glass had hit just a little higher, I'd be dead." And suddenly, this wasn't about PR mishandling. This was about whether Blake Lively came within inches of involuntary manslaughter. Now, if you think Blake's team would have denied this cleanly, think again. The footage from the Preserve office that day? Mostly missing, corrupted, gone. But a single surviving clip was recovered and shown to the court. In it, Carly is seen exiting a conference room, pressing a blood-soaked napkin to her shoulder. Blake exits seconds later, calm, silent, completely indifferent. There's no footage of the actual throw, but the sound of glass shattering can clearly be heard. And in a case like this, sometimes the silence after the violence says more than the act itself. To make matters worse, Carly's hospital records, private, protected by law, were accessed less than 72 hours after her ER visit. Not by medical personnel, not by lawyers, but by a private PR firm hired by Blake Lively's management team. This firm didn't just access the files, they allegedly flagged optics vulnerabilities for the press. Blake's lawyer, under pressure, called it a routine audit for brand risk. The judge, unimpressed, called it morally bankrupt and legally suspect. Now the court is weighing not just evidence of assault, but possible HIPAA violations, data misuse, and obstruction. And still, Blake sat there, silent. No apology, no clarification, no controlled statement from her legal team. Just the echo of a meltdown she had created, and a testimony she couldn't erase. Carly's words were entered into the official record. So were the medical images. So was the court's reaction to Blake's behavior. It didn't take long after Carly Hughes stepped off the witness stand for Blake Lively's world to cave in further. Just 2 days later, on Friday, May 30th, the court heard from 2 more witnesses, this time not victims, not outsiders, but her own former employees. One had been a senior PR director at Preserve, the other a facilities coordinator. Both had worked with Blake directly, both were subpoenaed, and both, by the end of their testimony, had all but confirmed what the public had suspected for weeks. Blake Lively wasn't just at the center of a toxic workplace, she authored it. And just like that, the rogue incident defense fell apart like a reheated Pinterest pie crust. Under oath, the PR director testified that Blake routinely dismissed Carly's injury in internal meetings, reportedly referring to the 9-stitch gash as drama for a paper cut. According to her, Blake even joked in one media planning session that Carly's blood-soaked shirt was probably an aesthetic win and on brand for rosé season. This wasn't spin. This was disdain. What's worse, the facilities coordinator, the second witness, added that Blake allegedly referred to Carly as an optical liability we should phase out before she leaks. So much for compassion, so much for damage control. Because at this point, the only thing leaking faster than her credibility is her inner circle's loyalty. Then came the smoking gun. Internal emails submitted by the prosecution, dated just 3 weeks after the alleged glass-throwing incident. Subject line? Plan B, character demolition. Attached? A full communications strategy mapped out by Blake's own crisis manager, outlining how to discredit Carly in the press, invalidate her trauma, and, if necessary, leak counter-allegations about her mental health. It wasn't subtle. It was surgical. And according to the metadata, the document had been approved by none other than Blake Lively. What kind of person writes a PR campaign to destroy someone they just sent to the hospital? Even more damning was the handwritten note. Recovered from Blake's personal journal and verified for handwriting authenticity, it read simply, "If Carly flips, we flip it back harder." The defense tried to keep it out. The judge let it in. The courtroom? Completely stunned. Because this wasn't legal preparation. It was personal warfare masquerading as strategy. And Blake's team hasn't even started calling witnesses yet. That's the terrifying part. But the real earthquake didn't come from Carly or even from Blake's staffers. It came from across the aisle, from Justin Baldoni's legal team, who showed up not just to observe, but to detonate. The court had granted Baldoni's attorneys limited access to Preserve financial archives as part of their own defamation countersuit. What they brought back was devastating. They introduced a set of banking records and wire transfer logs, tracing a number of unexplained payments routed from Blake's PR firm, Jones Works, to a private offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It wasn't the amount that shocked the courtroom. It was who received them. One of the recipients listed in the documents was a former intern at Preserve who had filed an HR complaint in 2021 claiming that Blake psychologically abused her for sport. The complaint never saw daylight, but the intern was paid, quietly, and through layers of third-party intermediaries. The amount? $18,000. Not a severance. Not a settlement. A silencing fee. allegedly signed off directly by Blake Lively. And yes, the signature matched. At what point does a PR payout stop being a company decision and start becoming a personal bribe? It didn't stop there. Baldoni's team went further, showing that Carly's former roommate had also received a payment, this one totaling $70,000, funneled over 5 months and disguised as a consulting retainer. The roommate never worked for Preserve, never signed a W-2, but she did go on to appear anonymously in a gossip article that painted Carly as manipulative and mentally unstable. Coincidence? The court didn't seem to think so. A motion has now been approved to investigate the law firm that processed these payments, which could lead to disbarment proceedings if wrongdoing is confirmed. And just like that, what began as a case about a glass of wine is turning into a financial crime investigation. Blake's attorneys, clearly rattled, tried to pivot, calling the payments standard NDA closures for sensitive personnel matters. But the paper trail doesn't lie. The amounts don't align with industry practice, and the names receiving them aren't staff. They're liabilities. Meanwhile, Baldoni's team has made it clear. They will continue to pursue evidence of what they're calling patterned information suppression. That phrase is now underlined in the court transcript, likely to appear in future filings. And when your opponents start using legal terms like patterned suppression, you know the jury won't be far behind. By the time court resumed on June 3rd, the Blake Lively case was no longer just a matter of assault. It had evolved into something far darker. Carly Hughes's legal team didn't mince words. "This isn't a workplace injury," her attorney told the judge. "We're talking about a premeditated act of violence." The room froze. For weeks, this had been framed as a moment of rage, an impulsive mistake. But now, the argument shifted. Blake Lively didn't just throw a glass. She weaponized it. And more disturbingly, she may have planned it. When therapy notes become evidence, it stops being PR and starts becoming pathology. Jennifer Abel, a former crisis strategist with Jones Works, testified that she was explicitly told to bury Carly's hospital visit under a fake wellness blog post. Instead of acknowledging the ER report, they ran a feel-good piece on tea benefits and gratitude. Jennifer also confirmed she had personally edited public statements from Blake to remove lines that showed rage or guilt. When asked why she didn't resign, she simply said, "We all knew the goal wasn't truth, it was optics." When deception becomes strategy, does the line between PR and cover-up even exist anymore? Slack messages leaked in court proved how far this strategy went. One PR executive wrote, "Keep her on payroll. She photographs well. That's it." Another chilling line read, "We won't win in truth. We win in optics." These weren't rogue opinions. They were part of a coordinated plan to manage fallout before the world even knew a lawsuit existed. Jones Works, the firm behind the strategy, is now facing formal investigation for conspiracy to obstruct justice and media tampering. It's no longer a scandal. It's organized damage control under legal scrutiny. But even the most expensive spin jobs can't mask a public breakdown. Then shifted the spotlight back to Blake herself, or rather, what's left of her. A court-admitted therapist report diagnosed her with impulse control disorder and something called celebrity identity dissociation, a condition where the person cannot separate their public persona from reality. Her breakdown in court, now infamous, was described as part meltdown, part confession. She screamed, shook, and reportedly shouted, "I built this from nothing!" as security guards tried to calm her. And now, sources suggest she may be eyeing a plea deal, not to clear her name, but to save what's left of it.